A proper article in due time. Bloomberg came out with an article just a few days ago, August 24th, about the power outage that occurred Friday, August 14th. It's a well-researched explanatory article talking about how the power outages happened but weren't unforeseen. It's due to decisions made over years, which intuitively makes a lot of sense. Most things that happen aren't one-off occurrences. They're the bad decision of not one person or entity, but rather the effects of collective decisions made by many. The New York Times article had been published a week earlier, and it was titled Rolling Blackouts in California Have Power Experts Stumped. I've talked about it before, how it's poorly researched and it was basically misleading. Let's look at the differences between these two articles, delving into why the power outages actually occurred. Just a short recap, you could also watch my prior video. In the New York Times article, Friday, August 4th was an unbearably hot day, hitting 108 degrees in Sacramento, hotter in other areas of California, even like, Death Valley, where it hit record highs. The ISO, California's independent system operator, had instituted rolling blackouts that affected many people, a few million. And he said there wasn't enough power. Some power plants had been shut down and they couldn't get electricity from out of state. The New York Times article said there was plenty of power and blackouts weren't necessary, based on conversation with these experts. They noted that peak electricity use was lower than peaks of other years, and I comment that this shows a lack of understanding or research or both, as a lower peak doesn't mean anything if you have a lower supply as well. Everybody knows supply and demand have to be matched. Who cares what the demand is if you don't know what the supply is? And it turns out if you look at California's energy production, that's actually decreased year after year. In 2018, the total in-state generation of electricity was 195,000 gigawatts. In 2017, it's 206,000. That's a decrease. And this is 2020, so if it's decreasing every year, it'd be even lower this year. The New York Times did not mention any of this. The Bloomberg article is written by two people. It's more than a week later than the New York Times article, but it delves into the history of power generation in California. Talks about the energy markets, how it's a strange phenomenon day ahead. The day prior, people already realized, the energy traders, that electricity was reaching sky-high rates. And if you look into the history of what this happened before July 2018, there was very high energy demand, but it didn't seem to be the case this year. So why is the price so high? Let's go back to the simple supply and demand curves. There's two curves, supply and demand. And in the ideal economic setting, the price is where the two curves intersect. The price can vary depending on supply or demand. In the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was scrambling for food they could store, rice and pasta. The demand went up, but there wasn't any more rice or pasta available. You can't just magically get more rice overnight. It takes a bit of time to grow rice. So the price went up. The supply did stay the same. Demand went up, so price went up. We all understand that phenomenon of scarcity. But in this case, the demand didn't seem to be going up that much, and the price still shot up. Why? If the demand's the same but the supply goes down, the price will go up. This happened recently with the meat in the U.S. The supply went down. I don't think people were eating more meat. They were just eating what they always have been, but the supply was down, so the price goes up. The authors mentioned that there's not a single source of blame, and this makes a lot of sense. California hasn't had decreasing energy generation for a while. The market already predicted something spectacular was going to happen given the sky-high electricity prices. And the weather was bad, super hot. More people were using electricity for AC. That Friday morning, grid operators noted they'd seen worse. They'd seen more demand. They thought the day wouldn't be that special. But when they asked the neighboring states, hey, you got any electricity to spare? Everybody said, nope, no. No. They may have had it, but they're keeping it for themselves. It's like if you're hiking in the desert and someone asks you have any extra water? Nope. Somebody actually wanted to buy water off of me when we were hiking up to Half Dome. I actually gave them a bottle. You can't buy water when you're on Half Dome. It's priceless. You need it yourself. There is no way to get water up there. And then a gas power plant went offline, taking with it about 500 megawatts. So the state told other power companies to fire up the reserve. Except there wasn't much reserve capacity left. You can see here the gas plants had basically ramped up all they got. By early evening, they had no more left to give. So California had been shutting out energy generation. They're trying to move to renewable sources, and that's good. They shut down a lot of the natural gas plants. 9 gigawatts over the past 5 years. They also try to make up for this with outsourcing energy production. So in 2018, 30% of California's electricity was imported from other states. As with most things, regulators had been warned, though of course regulators denied this, saying, oh, just like right now with the pandemic, nobody told us there'd be a pandemic, of course we can't prepare. So on Friday, when they saw solar production was starting to drop off in the evening, as night's falling, you can't have solar energy, they knew they were in trouble. There just wasn't going to be enough energy. On a side, I find it surprising more people use AC at night. Because in college, my roommate in school would only turn on the AC at night so we could sleep, because it's too expensive to run it all day long, he said. I'm not sure why, but in some areas, it's actually hottest not at midday, but actually in the evening. Where I am, maybe afternoon, but if you go to the Sacramento area, it actually gets hotter at 5 or 6 or 7 even. So they wanted to get more electricity. They could ramp up hydroelectric production. That's about the only renewable energy source you could ramp up, because it's literally energy storage. A dam stores water, which is potential energy, and releases it to produce energy. But there's not a lot of energy to be had from the Northwest. And then they failed a flexible ramping sufficiency test, meaning they couldn't import power. I don't understand what it is. It's an artificial test they create that they run and pass in order to get more energy. It's obviously not a simple thing to understand. But it just is that if you fail, you can't transfer power into your market. You can't get power from the energy imbalance market. And it's not like nobody fails it. They fail all the time. If you look here, it lists some energy corporations and the average hours failed per day. And it's basically never zero. So basically it's failed every day. And the thing is, if you fail, you're limited in how much power you could transfer. Even though your wires have the capability of transferring more power, and there's more power to be had, this is just how the energy imbalance market is set up. So in conclusion, what happened? The question is the same as the New York Times article. If there had been hotter days in the past and higher demand in the past, why did it fail now? And the answer here, with all the evidence given to back it up, is simple. There wasn't enough energy. New York Times is supposed to be a good newspaper. It's been around forever. It's won more Pulitzer Prizes than any other newspaper. But in this case, they failed. All they put on their article was pure speculation. They provided no details nor context about the California power generation system. Is it because the writer was pushed to put out a piece really quickly? Better have a bad piece that's timely than a good piece published a week later, when the blackouts aren't as fresh in people's minds? Yes, people have short attention spans. It's very important to be relevant, to publish while something is still in the headlines while it's fresh, so people will click on it. But presumably the New York Times has a commitment to integrity, journalism that's factual and correct, and this article was simply not that. To simply ignore the fact that California has a much decreased electricity generation capacity compared to years past is just to be wrong. My conclusion is that the New York Times article was clickbait, based on their own definition of clickbait, which is coming away feeling cheated. It is meaningless speculation, just like TMZ or some other trashy website. After reading it, I felt I wasted my time. No explanation, no intellectual discussion of the energy crisis in California. Luckily, Bloomberg had some writers who took their time and researched it, came out with a good piece of journalism. I don't think it's a question of better late than ever. It's all about journalistic integrity. And you just shouldn't put out a misleading article, period.